Thank you so much, Deborah, and welcome everybody. We are delighted to be able to spend a few minutes with you talking about the entrepreneurial mindset profile. Let's kick off with how are people using the EMP? So we use it in a number of leadership development programs, especially when the focus is on innovation, creativity, growth, or strategic direction. Also using it with individual and team-based coaching. We have practitioners using it in career and workforce development programs, community-based programs for aspiring entrepreneurs, a number of college and university classes and institutional benchmarking, and then a number of research streams underway on entrepreneurial mindset and entrepreneurial success. As of today, more than 45,000 EMPs have been completed, and we have more than 740 certified EMP practitioners representing 42 countries and U.S. territories. And we're hoping a number of you will join that group. So it's really important to start by clarifying what the EMP does and does not do. The EMP does not produce an overall score that indicates whether you are or are not entrepreneurial, and it doesn't tell you whether you should or should not become an entrepreneur. Rather, what the EMP does is it plots your scores on 14 distinct elements of entrepreneurial mindset against an exclusive normative database for both entrepreneurs and corporate managers, and then invites you to reflect on your own strengths and to consider the ways in which you may want to enhance one or more elements of entrepreneurial thought or action. So the authors who created the EMP set out to explore how entrepreneurs differ from corporate managers, and all the ways that they differ are considered entrepreneurial mindset. And so very quickly concluded that entrepreneurial mindset is not an either-or proposition or a single number like an IQ score, but more like a profile of various traits and abilities. We're going to do a quick poll and ask for your thoughts. Is entrepreneurial mindset purely genetic? Is it 100% learned, or is it both? Let's see what you think. Let's get some responses populated here. Okay, yes, and that's exactly what our research team concluded. So some of the elements that distinguish entrepreneurs from non-entrepreneurs probably are a little more stable or hardwired, and we call those personality dimensions. And there's 7 of those, but those include things like risk acceptance, independence, preference for limited structure. So for example, could we teach someone who is most comfortable in a lower risk environment to recognize situations in which they could take greater risk? The answer is yes, we probably could, and it might help them if they wanted to be more entrepreneurial, but we probably wouldn't change their overall orientation toward risk. And when given the opportunity, they would likely make choices to reduce their risk, which would make them feel a lot more comfortable. So while you can move the needle on the 7 of the 14 dimensions that are categorized as personality dimensions, and we do have suggestions for how to move the needle on each of the 14 dimensions, we find that the scales that we call personality scales have greater implications for fit, for thinking about what type of role might be a good fit for you, what kind of industry might be a good fit, what kind of function might you feel most comfortable in. And then the other 7 dimensions on the EMP are categorized as skills scales, and these are a little bit more responsive to development. And so, for example, take idea generation. There are plenty of techniques designed to help people become more effective and adept at brainstorming. And so with enough training and practice, those behaviors can become very well versed, habitual, and really develop skills in that case in idea generation, and each of the other 7 dimensions that are categorized as skill-based. Here's the full list of 14 scales on the EMP. And while I'll just point out that interpersonal sensitivity is italicized, the reason for that is of the 14 scales, this is the one scale on which entrepreneurs on average score themselves slightly lower than do corporate managers. So compared to corporate managers, entrepreneurs describe themselves as a little bit more abrasive, as a little harder to work with. There are probably lots of reasons for that. We think it's probably because they may be a little more task focused, and corporate managers are rewarded for interpersonal sensitivity, and it can be a derailer if they're not sensitive to the people that they work with. The authors felt that interpersonal sensitivity is a useful dimension to consider regardless of the career path that you choose, and so that's why it's there on the assessment. And point out too, there is an excellent published journal article for those of you interested in learning a little bit more about the development of the EMP, including the reliability, validity, implications for practitioners. Here is that that source, and certainly can send that information to each of you as well. We'll do another quick poll. For whom is entrepreneurial mindset important? Managers, entrepreneurs, students, or everyone? Let's see how we respond there, Deborah, and I'll let you decide when to end that poll and display the results. Okay, so 80% of you said everyone, and 20% of you said for entrepreneurs. And we'll just point out that in the perspective of the research team, it really all depends on your context. And we like to say in the world of the EMP, context is king. So it really all depends on the particular scales you're looking at and what your goals are, what the organization expects of you. We will suggest, though, that for many organizational leaders, it can be very helpful to utilize an entrepreneurial mindset, especially when there's an organizational need to drive growth and innovation. So let me walk you through just real quickly what the actual assessment report looks like. And so we've got a sample report here. And as you open the report, you'll see a one-line description starting with the personality scales. And then you'll see that the individual's results are plotted relative to the corporate manager norm and the entrepreneur norm group. So in this case, Susan Sample's results are showing up in red, and the corporate manager norm group is showing up in blue, and the entrepreneurial norm group in green. So what do we see here? We see that Susan has some very clear entrepreneurial strengths. She has very high preference for limited structure. She has a high need to achieve. She's high on passion, and those would be entrepreneurial strengths to explore with her. I will mention, what does it take to get into the norm groups that you're seeing here on the graph? So to be included in the corporate manager norm group, individuals have to not own a business, not co-own a business, and work for an organization and have at least 2 direct reports. To be in the entrepreneur norm group, they have to own or co-own a business and answer yes to the question, do you consider yourself an entrepreneur? As of May of last year, when we most recently renormed the document, we have a total of 1,679 corporate managers in the norm group and 3,600 entrepreneurs in the entrepreneur norm group. So as you continue on the report, you can see that The highs and lows are flagged for people, including what the advantages of high scores might be, what the advantages of low might be, but also what the challenges might be for them to think about. And then we move on with the same format for the skill scales, a definition of each of the 7, the visual for Susan in this case, what do her scores look like? And then the narrative description to support her, and of course her practitioner working with her on this to think about the highs, the lows, and what those implications may be. One thing I want to point out too, unlike a number of other psychometric assessments that are on the market, the individual responses to each of the items are actually published in the feedback report. So people can see exactly what the items were that made up that scale, how they responded to the items, and that can be very helpful in interpreting their results. So that's available. And then when people take the report and get their results, when they take the assessment and get their results, they immediately get access to 2 great resources to support them in working with their results. One is an EMP feedback video that walks through a very helpful kind of generic debrief of thinking about results. And then the second is access to a very resource-rich development guide that has chapters on each of the 14 scales. And as you can see here, a chapter on all 14. Within the chapter, there are suggestions for how to interpret their results, what does it look like when strengths are overplayed, and then a number of suggestions for development and suggested readings if it happens to be a particular scale that they would like to move the needle on. So we like to make the point that there are lots of options for addressing low scales. So people can decide that the scales on which they score relatively low are not relevant to their job performance, their personal satisfaction, or their place in the universe, and they can forget about it. So a low score is not necessarily bad. If they do feel that it would be helpful to have a more balanced set of strengths, they can team with somebody or with more than one individual to take advantage of complementary strengths in a group or a team. They can use the development guide to come up with ideas for strengthening and moving the needle on a particular scale. And then, of course, they can engage with an EMP practitioner or executive coach who has expertise in entrepreneurial mindset. So it's really important to remember that there's no single profile that captures the ideal entrepreneur or the ideal corporate leader or the ideal entrepreneurship student or the ideal human being. The richness and value of the EMP feedback really lies in the unique profile of the 14 scores interpreted within the individual and organizational context. No such thing as a good or bad score. It all depends on what you value and what you're trying to accomplish. Now, we also wanted to highlight for you another resource that's available that a lot of organizations are taking advantage of, and that is a team report. So if you're working with a team or with groups that you think could benefit from understanding how they, what their entrepreneurial strengths are and what their mindset is, the report itself looks similar to an individual report. In this case, the red line represents the average score of members of a team relative to the norm groups. And then there's another page on the group report that's super helpful that shows you within the team or group that you're working with, what was the low score on that team? What's the high score? What's the highest score that any individual got on that scale? And then what's the group average? And we have had a number of teams who've identified hidden strengths on their team and areas where they can leverage the talents of individuals to support the overall group. For those of you who are working with teams, we also have available for a very reasonable price a team workshop facilitation kit. And this is a complete program that can be duplicated exactly, or it can serve as a basic framework upon which to build your own program using the EMP. It can be a true time saver with content that's fully developed and geared specifically toward teams. It's designed in a module format, so you can think about what sequence of modules works best for you. They're ready to go exercises with a PowerPoint presentation, and then the logistics for pre and post for you to think about too. So benefits of getting certified as an EMP practitioner. You'll learn how to interpret the EMP results both at the individual and group level. You'll qualify for significant discounts on all individual and group EMP administrations. You'll gain access to a password-protected practitioner portal for administering, scoring, and managing your EMPs. You'll benefit from a library of resources that's available solely for certified practitioners, and then join what has become a thriving community of practice with opportunities to attend and lead exclusive virtual practitioner forums. Also, we at the college accept applications for research grants for those of you who are thinking about doing some research using the EMP, so we can fill you in on those opportunities. The EMP is available in these languages, with more coming soon. In terms of pricing, for somebody to go on the website and just take the EMP on their own, they would pay $80. But for you as certified practitioners, you can see here there's a sliding scale. If you are working with corporate leaders, depending on how many you purchase, you would only pay $34 to $40 per administration. If you are working with nonprofit and government entities, $35 to $40, and then if you're working with students, $25 to $30. And then you can see the range too on the group reports, and the data pool represents what we charge for providing the data for those of you doing research. It includes all the demographic information for your participants and the results for all 72 assessment items. And just want to point out, upcoming certification workshops are listed here with the pricing and what we look for in candidates for certification. And would like to also offer to each of you a free administration. If you're interested in taking the EMP, there's an opportunity here for you to do so with the email address available to you. So feel free to take a screenshot there. And just want to remind you that we are housed within the Leadership Development Institute at Eckerd College. We have a number of incredible programs for leaders. We also house the Mediation Training Institute. We have another proprietary assessment called the Conflict Dynamics Profile, which is a behavior-based assessment and a model on dealing with conflict effectively. And so that's all available to you. And we hope that you'll stay in touch with us. There are many ways to do so. At this point, happy to open it up to questions.